Ooh, coming to you a little later tonight than expected, but the Golden Stallion is here for you for a little Wednesday Q&A. Boy, I got to tell you, lost some patrons this week. I mean, I kind of predicted it last week that I would. I'm not exactly sure why I lost patrons, but I did. So, hey, what are you going to do, you know? You win some, you lose some. Did gain a couple patrons, but yeah, we lost some. So, well, anyway, exciting stuff happening this week that I'll be getting into, well, when it comes out this week. Some really, really cool things that I'm looking forward to. Why waste time? Let's get right into this week's questions. We don't have so much the political one like last week, which I figured that's why people wanted to go. I don't know. Maybe they didn't like hearing that I don't believe in white nationalism, or maybe they didn't like that on this recent episode of Sovereign Tech that I ripped on Lauren Southern. Apparently she has a lot of fans. I don't know why, but I guess so. But, you feel free to send me feedback. I usually like it. I mean, I don't mind if people don't want to pay for the content anymore. That's fine. But, it'd be cool to know why that is. Of course, maybe, it could be just pure, I don't know, Christmas is a-coming, and maybe they felt like they got to save every dollar. Certainly I can appreciate that. Doesn't necessarily mean that I did something wrong, but who the hell knows? Anyway, let's get into this content. Let's get into the questions for this weekend. Got a few doozies. In fact, we'll open it up with a little tech question having to do with OpenBazaar. Brian Sovereign, I'd love to hear your opinion on OpenBazaar, its strengths, its weaknesses, and whether or not it has a viable future. Okay, so to answer the last part of whether or not it has a viable future, I think that is entirely based upon it accepting more cryptocurrencies, necessarily than Bitcoin or something like that. I think for it to survive, I mean, the abstract idea is great, a completely literally completely decentralized marketplace. I think there's a lot of strengths to that, because then you can't have what happened with Alphabay or the Silk Road or things like this, because, I mean, what server can you shut down? You can't. So yeah, this is important. It's one of the most important developments in technology, really, maybe since cryptocurrencies, maybe since the iPod. I mean, this is a really, really big deal. Now, it's not the most important development in technology. I think that's still at the end of the day is going to be, I guess I'll say MR, mixed reality, or merged reality, depending on what terms you want to use for that, which is that combination of virtual reality and augmented reality. So I think mixed reality is really the next big boon, and there's already blockchain companies, getting involved with that. So even when the blockchain space and every other tech space is all pointing in one direction, I mean, what's really the next big thing? Well, obviously it's whatever they're pointing at, and they're pointing at mixed reality. But OpenBazaar itself, I mean, very interesting, because there's a lot of, I remember Jason Calacanis, who is a major VC in Silicon Valley, who said he wouldn't touch OpenBazaar with a 10-foot pole. He wouldn't go anywhere near it. And he said anybody would be crazy to put money down on OpenBazaar. But it's, seemingly been a success. It has found VC funders. Yeah, I mean, any weaknesses that I perceive, really, it's only, I mean, there's not a whole lot to say. I think its strengths are apparent. The fact that, again, it's almost like the Pirate Bay for torrents, right? Where the Pirate Bay, I mean, you shut down a server and then there's another server that already has it up next. But it's even better than that, because as long as, I mean, you can't shut down every computer that's running OpenBazaar, right? And you have OpenBazaar 2.0, which is different than 1.0. And, there's a lot of features coming along with that. But the idea of having a marketplace that is completely distributed is just, I mean, yeah, that has to be, that's really, it's really something. I mean, the abstract idea, maybe OpenBazaar won't be the future. Like I said, if they don't get on board with accepting a lot more different cryptocurrencies, I think they're going to find themselves in trouble, but something else will take its place. That's for sure. And that's its only weakness, is just whether or not it's going to be willing to open itself up to other crypto. I mean, and I could see advantages. I don't think there's anything wrong necessarily with OpenBazaar's, encryption scheme and everything that it's doing. In fact, it barely really has to do one because mainly the encryption's happening more on the cryptocurrency side than it is on the OpenBazaar side, right? But that's part of why I think it should also, be like, take a cryptocurrency based on ZK snarks. Look, it doesn't have to be Zcash. Just something based on that technology that's really impressive. Okay. So yeah, that, the strengths, again, fairly, so one could get into what are the problems, like, you don't really, if the seller's anonymous, then can you really trust what you're getting? Oh boy, that gets into a huge subject. I get it. There's very rudimentary reputation systems that can be put into play. All of those could be gamed. You definitely run into that problem. And something that's going to end up becoming a problem at some point for OpenBazaar is that I think that I almost feel like there's, like, I don't know if OpenBazaar could ever become like an Amazon, because one of the issues you're going to have, you can have a distributed marketplace, but then you can't also have a central warehouse from which maybe stuff could get shipped from or things like this. I kind of feel like OpenBazaar, as important as it is, that sort of technology, unless we get to an anarchist paradise of some kind where nothing is banned anymore, okay, there's always going to be a problem with scale. There's always going to be the issue where, if it's for illicit products, and if it's not for illicit products, most people are just going to go to Amazon. Why are they going to deal with the software of OpenBazaar? Ethically, as a conscious consumer, you may choose to do that, and I respect that, and I think that that's great. Okay, but you are going to run into the problem of, just scale. Because, okay, sure, your marketplace is distributed now, but your warehouse can't be. And your warehouse can only be so big. And and eventually someone's going to connect the dots as to where that shit can be, where that shit is shipping from, right? So unless you continually keep it small, and this is the thing. And look, this isn't necessarily a problem for me because I'm the kind of guy that wants most crypto tech to be, small scale. Because I don't think the average person knows why they need it nor do they care. Communications is kind of the one aspect of, obviously that doesn't have to deal with cryptocurrencies. You could have, like, Zencash is using ZK snarks as a communication platform. Is using zero knowledge proofs, which is what Zcash is based on. They're using that as a communication platform, right? So I think that that's cool. You can go ahead and do that. But encrypted communications is something that can scale infinitely. All right. And cryptocurrencies can scale infinitely too. The thing is that unlike messaging, which everybody needs to do, and I said in, I think in this past week's episode of Sovereign Tech, in episode 239, you have, messaging is really the backbone of communications now. Not telephones, not email. As much as email is really important today, especially. Okay, and thank you for all those that have continued to sign up for my newsletter, for the Sovereign Tech newsletter at zog.email. But these messaging platforms like Facebook Messenger, Line, WhatsApp, whatever. This is where the real battleground of communications is happening, and that can be infinitely scalable. Certainly there's arguments to be made around that, and they've been made over whether, Signal will just always be a niche product. Maybe. But my point being, so I got lost in the weeds there for a second. My point being is that a lot of this stuff, like, people don't know why, because as I've talked about many times, because there's always that trade-off between convenience and security. A lot of people don't understand why they need to get rid of the convenience of dealing with Amazon and whatever, and why they need to, unless, they want to buy contraband and illicit substances. I'm using conventional terms, of course. I don't consider anything those things. Unless they want that, they don't see the point. So I feel like, and also, so you have that working against you with OpenBazaar, okay, because the average person just doesn't see the need. But even if, say, OpenBazaar somehow became a thing that became the everything store, okay, if we're in a world where lawn darts alone are still illegal, okay, which they are in the U.S., then the warehouse that's selling them, at a large enough scale, eventually is going to get caught and shut down by the U.S. government. So there's a scaling problem with OpenBazaar. I mean, unless all it's going to do is sell drugs. And it doesn't just do that, but let's be clear here that this distributed marketplace, that the abstract idea is fucking awesome, is absolutely wonderful. Okay. This abstract idea has niche markets that really it can only work for right now. And it's kind of a false market signal in the fact that it works and it has value and weight, not necessarily based upon, because the average person that even buys on there, they probably wouldn't care whether it's a distributed marketplace or if it's one on a central server, as long as they can get their shit. Okay. You're going to run into the problem that people don't understand why it's needed. And the false market signal is that there's things that are illegal and that's how you get them, So yeah, I don't know that that's necessarily a weakness. I mean, obviously it's a market signal in that it's working around regulations and all that, certainly. And that's the power of the market. But at the same time, if nothing was banned anymore, and heroin and all that stuff was, and marijuana, whatever was totally legal. Okay. Amazon would probably sell it and nobody would really give a shit about OpenBazaar so much. I don't think, unless it was because they wanted to use cryptocurrencies and say Amazon, who I also think will never accept Bitcoin. They just have no fucking reason to. Come on. I said that years ago. And now the evidence is even stacked higher. Every dollar out of $2 spent on the internet is on Amazon. Why do they need to accept any crypto other than the ones maybe that they create for themselves, like Amazon Coin out of Lab 126 or something? They just don't. That's not an insult. Obviously, I love cryptocurrencies. I'm not insulting them at all. I'm just saying, let's be honest. Okay, because there's a lot of people a few years ago who kept saying, oh yeah, we'll force Amazon to take it. No, you won't. No, you won't. And if this shit wasn't illegal, a lot of this stuff, this is a huge point to get into. Again, I'm not insulting anyone or anything. I'm not. I'm just, saying the realities here is that a lot of this peer-to-peer technology, a lot of this distributed technology, a lot of this decentralization and all this stuff, really wouldn't, I think it wouldn't even be to the stage where it is now if it wasn't for, governments. These are huge things that we have to consider. Is that what if you did live in a world without governments? Are you still going to have cryptocurrencies? I say yes, but the argument could be made for no, that we might be in a very different situation because, again, you don't need the technology that gets past all of the authoritarianism, right? So, just something to think about. But anyway, I went way out there. But with OpenBazaar, yeah, depending upon how you look at this as to what's a strength or a weakness, it could be seen as a weakness that it has a scaling problem. It's always going to have a scaling problem as long as we live in a world with regulation. Also, it has to accept more cryptocurrencies. So those are the two weaknesses. Its strengths is that, again, you can't shut it down. However, that also leads to the weakness of you can't really have a giant warehouse either. Great. The marketplace is peer-to-peer. It's decentralized. It's distributed, right? But the shipping isn't. We got a big problem there, and one that's likely never going to get solved, at least not while there's governments around. So just putting that out there. So I think OpenBazaar, I've had a kind of, I've had a touch and go relationship with it because I feel like OpenBazaar really downplayed its greatest strength, which is the fact that it gets government, it makes government it can make at scale or at a small scale, which is sort of what it's at right now. It can make government interference meaningless. and they don't sell it that way. And I get it. They got to talk to VCs. They got to get investors. They got to, they got to keep the money flowing into it, blah, 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 blah. You don't want to mention that. Just like people that talk about Bitcoin, most of them don't like to, tout and be excited about the fact, hey, I can buy drugs with this. I understand. I get the marketing point, but I was a little annoyed that these guys, weren't pumping up the anarchism quite a bit as to where, you take, well, for instance, you take Signal, you take, there's a whole slew of, or even like Telegram, and getting past governments is a huge part of their market value or of their marketing. It is in their verbiage. It's in their mission statements, and I love that. Fuck yeah, baby. You tell them that you are here to thwart the shit out of government. Goddamn right. And I was disappointed that the guys at OpenBazaar, whenever they had like big interview opportunities, they never brought it up. But I get it. I understand why they don't do that. So, but I felt a little disappointed by it. So anyway, I hope that answers that question. Again, in the abstract, great idea. And I'm sure there's going to be ever more implementations, and when we'll see how that shapes up. In fact, there's a great, agoristhosting.com. Those guys, they'll help integrate your entire business with OpenBazaar. And I think that's phenomenal. That's really cool that you can do that. But anyway, they're a past sponsor of Sovereign Tech, admittedly, but that's part of the reason why I know they can do what they do. So hope that answers that about OpenBazaar. Yeah, totally valuable technology. I think it absolutely has a future, whether or not it's OpenBazaar itself or it's some kind of clone. But that concept is definitely going to be around for a good long while. But again, understand there is an upper limit. Like there becomes an issue where, if it's for buying illicit stuff, and again, I'm saying I'm telling you that it doesn't have to be, but if it's not illicit stuff, most people won't trade the security won't trade the convenience for the security, say, of Open, or the anonymity of OpenBazaar, which is a part of security. They won't trade it, and they'll just buy it on Amazon, right? So it kind of, for it to work, it kind of has to be for illicit stuff, and illicit stuff really does have a storage problem. It has a warehouse problem. It can only go so far before it becomes a centralized spot that the government can point their guns at. So anyway, okay, let's get on to another question. There's going to be some fun ones in this too. Let's see. So we have, would you want your original mind, not an AI attempting to mimic you, downloaded to a computer after your body withers away? So this was actually asked on Twitter. I get the point that the question asker is making, and I appreciate it. But I sort of feel like there's kind of a false premise here. Like, not saying that the person is intending that. I'm just saying that in my mind, I think there's kind of a false premise, because I don't know how, I don't know exactly how you download your brain exactly, and what gets downloaded into some computer. How do I know that? I mean, to some degree, the way that, like, even say you're copying hard drives, okay, which might, proof from analogy isn't proof, but let's run with this analogy. If you're copying hard drives, you're really writing new data. And so it's not like you're just doing a raw transfer. You're writing new data onto, say, the glass platter or whatever, in a traditional hard drive, right? So when it's not like you're doing a brain dump, where my brain is like, you're literally draining everything out of my brain into a computer. You're making a copy. And so how do we know? And I don't mean the question of, like, do you trust the technology? Let's say you trusted the technology all the way. Like, that's really not my memories. That's really not my brain. That's a copy of it. And I don't know where that doesn't get defined as an AI of some kind that could actually process and use that copy of my brain. So I guess what I'm saying is that now I'm not necessarily game for that. And there's other issues there too, because this computer, say, that you download my brain into, would have to mimic not only my memories in my brain, my RNA and all that. It would have to also mimic the connections to my legs, the connections to my arms. It'd have to mimic my entire body and mimic those connections, millions of connections, exactly. Because, your brain, so in my opinion, and this is based upon a degree of research, not by me, but by actual scientists. In my opinion, your consciousness is more than just what's upstairs. It's more than just what's in your brain. There's so many things that affect who you, I shouldn't say consciousness, I guess who you are, the unique one. Maybe we'll use a Sternerism. Who you are is very much based upon like how you are able to react to stimuli. And a lot of that comes from muscle memory. It comes from, the way, how much pain can your body handle compared to another person's body. I mean, there's so many factors involved. A computer would have to perfectly emulate all that, which I actually find hard to believe that it could mimic all of that. Because again, I think you, the person, you are more than your brain. All right. I'm not saying there's some kind of Akashic record or some bullshit like that. I'm just saying you personally are more than your brain. I don't think there's a great definition for consciousness. And actually most scientists don't exactly know what or, how exactly to describe consciousness or where its seat exactly is, all of this. I mean, I'm inclined to believe even that your heart, like your literal heart, pumping heart, has a lot to do with the way that you think. Or there's gut bacteria, which we know absolutely affects mood and other things. So like is the computer going to simulate gut bacteria? There's so much. You yourself, the unique you, okay, the individual you, are much more than your brain. I mean, your body's an entire ecosystem in itself. It's its own little planet almost going around. And so, what makes you, I'm worried would disappear when you're just downloading bits. I mean, maybe it can simulate all that, to a degree, I guess. I'm far more amenable to, even though, like I just said, you're more than your brain. I am far more amenable to literally taking my brain and putting it in a vat and connecting it to a bunch of shit. Okay. That because then it's not a copy. Then it's still kind of the original memories and all this different stuff. In fact, that whole argument is one of the reasons I don't believe we're in a computer simulation, but that's another conversation for another time. So anyway, because the computer simulation idea is literally called the brain in the vat theory, but I don't think that makes sense because I also don't believe that consciousness, that who you are, comprises entirely inside of your brain. I think there's plenty of evidence, or at least theoretical evidence, to suggest quite the opposite. I mean, the brain is important, no doubt about it, but there's a lot more to you than just your brain. So that's why I'm really big on the idea of, well, first off, cryogenics, but also where maybe our keys to immortality are in the direction of like Aubrey de Grey is going, where we're talking about, okay, the body is kind of decomposing, but it really doesn't need to. He's not talking about transhumanism. He's necessarily, as in where, you end up in a robot body or something like that. Aubrey de Grey's work, like in the book Ending Aging and some others, and what he does is the Sens Foundation and some other things. His work is on making, the human body effectively, like biologically, organically, as an organism, not organically as in like authentic, but organically immortal, to where it goes on forever. That I am far more interested in than any kind of real transhumanism. I'm not going to stop anybody from being into transhumanism. You have a great time with that. You rock and roll. And if I'm on my deathbed, who knows? Maybe I'll think differently about it. Maybe I'll think, yeah, okay, go ahead, download my brain. Again, you're making a copy. Make that copy of my brain and I'll continue on. But, as it stands, that's not me. I mean, I've said this many a time. I mean, that's the grandpa in a can theory. I mean, look, grandpa's dead. I hate to say it. I mean, but that's how it is. So yeah, I don't really, I don't even really think that that's possible, that for what makes me, but the unique one, the individual, can be translated into a computer. Because I mean, there's so many, there's just so much to that. It's not just my memories and thoughts. In fact, I mean, without my body, I would be a completely different person. Now, I mean, you could say, well, is this like, was it San Junipero? Was that episode of Black Mirror? Is it like San Junipero where, when you die, they'll put you into this, into the storage thing and you can live forever inside of the storage stuff? I mean, sure, I suppose that's going to be a thing. And you have this entire virtual world where, and you have residual self-image, kind of like in the Matrix. And then, you can interact with your residual self-image and all this, within there. Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm really big on virtual reality, understand, but a lot of virtual reality, a lot of the experiences you're going to have, all those different things that can happen within virtual reality are partly going to be based upon a lot more than just what's going on in your head. I'm not opposed to it being just based off of what's in your head, but yeah, these are questions. I love the question, but it's a question that I think, or not that the question has a problem. It's a technology that the question is asking about that has far more questions than answers. It has far more, like there's way too many unknowns and way too many misunderstandings of how humans work. And I'll admit, I'm not super hopeful that there's even scientists really working in many ways on how humans work, because, I mean, how many times a year do they have these ethics conferences where scientists show up and they're all talking about how to make better soldiers and all this stuff. And it's like, holy fuck, if you understood the human condition, you wouldn't even bother. You wouldn't give a shit about making better soldiers. You'd be like, well, so how do we foster in a human being, to not re-express traumas and want to go to war in the first place, right? I mean, I don't mean like reprogramming people, but I'm just saying, like, let's actually understand how all this stuff, really affects humans and what even leads to tragic strategies, which that's an understatement if I've ever heard one, but tragic strategies like war. So anyway, there's my answer on that. I hope that worked for you. Let's go on to the next question here. This is also from Twitter. How do you you know what? Actually, I'm going to skip that one because we're just talking about war. Let's go on to, let's skip to the next one because it's kind of relevant. I hope this question isn't too personal, but when you were initially assigned a combat role in the military, did you protest it? No. It's not too personal. I don't talk about my military experience a lot. I mean, I have over Sovereign Tech's history. I get asked this a lot to talk about it. I am not like, I don't experience like PTSD or anything like that. I mean, I saw plenty of combat, but I'm not afraid to talk about it. I'll talk about it when needed. I so often feel like when I talk about it that, I don't know. It just doesn't, so it's not, I mean, it's kind of, it can be a hard thing for me to talk about, but it seems like no matter how much I talk about it or tell people about it, they just write it off. Like they don't, most people just don't seem to, like, it doesn't have any impact. And I really only want to talk about it if it helps, stop wars, if it helps put an end to a lot of this stuff. Otherwise, why would I want to? I mean, I don't look on it fondly. I don't look back and, oh, hey, that was a good time there, Bill. I mean, that's not how I see it. I mean, it's something I wish that I could forget. Sometimes I kind of can. I mean, I can't forgive myself for it, but sometimes I can forget about it. But yeah, so that's why I don't talk about it that much. Anyway, so to answer the question, when I was initially assigned a combat role in the military, did I protest it? So when I went, okay, I didn't protest it. When I was going into when I was signing up, okay, dealing with the, recruiter and everything, I kind of had a sense that I wanted to go in the direction of the job that I eventually ended up getting in the military, which was in psychological operations. And I'll admit, like, to some degree, it sort of sounded cool. I was very young, and okay, so like, all right, let's shoot for that. And they said, okay, no, you can't get that right out of the gate. And so, you have to do some other kind of, job, and psychological operations has a lot to do with communications. So I ended up becoming a 31 uniform, which was communications, but it was communications right on the field front lines. So I always knew, right when I signed up, I knew that I would be getting into combat situations. My mindset, the reason I went into the military at the time. Now, interesting thing, like, I was never really into guns, like, even as a kid. I mean, I've talked about this before. I've been reading Batman, since I was like 6. Star Trek is a huge part of me, and most of the time on Star Trek, what do they set those phasers to? They set them to stun. Okay, so, killing people was already kind of anathema in my head anyway. After what happened with 9/11, and after having encounters with the 9/11 Truth Movement, where they were blaming Jews for what happened, that, like, a lot of, I wanted vengeance. I wanted payback. I had family that died during 9/11. That was my mindset for going in, and the 9/11 Truth Movement pretty much secured that I would go to war because, they are so many there's aspects of what they have to say, like a general distrust of the government is a fine thing, and I sure as hell don't believe the official story. I don't believe that at all. Okay, but the lengths that the 9/11 Truth Movement goes to, and the conclusions that they come to in many things, are absolutely antithetical to any kind of rational thinking and any kind of rational conversation. I mean, they're just so far from. And so they pretty much ensured that, okay, well, see you later, assholes. I'm going to go, defend the country. And it's funny because I know a lot of people. They always say that, well, the 9/11 Truth Movement, like, that's what really got me into liberty and all that. No, that wasn't it for me at all. Like, not even close. It was the exact opposite. It made me a statist. It made me an ardent statist, the fucking 9/11 Truth Movement, because I knew so much of what they were saying, and certainly, the accusation of the Jews and Zionists and all this stuff was so ridiculous and had so little evidence that, I mean, I was livid. I have a story about that, where I got in an argument right in New York City with a bunch of guys holding up their signs, and it got ugly. And so, and I still speak out against, like, the whole 9/11 truth thing anyway, because, like, and it all comes, for me, it all comes down to a very simple point. If people are not willing to, hopefully peacefully, I only argue for peace, peacefully shut down their governments, or at least the U.S. government, based upon what the U.S. government does every single day on the news, unquestionably reported. Like, what did that orange ass hat say he's going to, I mean, how many more troops are they sending into Afghanistan now? I was over there. I thought that I ended that shit, or at least helped. Guess not. Anyway, if the American people can't see and recognize the positively egregious, deplorable, disgusting shit that their government does, openly, provably, no secrecy whatsoever, reported on every news station on the planet, if that's not enough, why, if they found out about 9/11 truth, would they do anything different? It is an absolute waste of time and resources to talk about that shit. An absolute waste of time. You want to convince people about things? Talk ethics. Have I, as far as what the military goes, I have helped convince. I mean, the real bravery is the people that took action and left the military. I've helped convince multiple people over the years with Sovereign Tech, convince them to leave the military, and they did. Good. Do you know why they did that? It wasn't because I proved some kind of bullshit that the government was doing, because I don't even get into that kind of thing that much. It's because we talk ethics, and they finally said to themselves one day, at least this is what they write to me. This is their words, and this is their courage, not mine. Okay? I'm not taking any credit here. They say, I heard your argument about this. I heard you talk about this. And I said, that's enough. I'm out. Kudos to them. Real heroes right there. Talk ethics. Talk philosophy. Don't waste this conspiracy, blah, blah, blah. Not to convince them to become anarchists or something like this. I don't think that that's going to fly. There's certainly, I love conspiracy theories, and there are interesting things to discuss. I have no illusions whatsoever, though, that somehow going over these things is going to somehow, lead to the government, becoming honest, which of course that's ridiculous, or government going away entirely. I could talk about Atlantis till I'm blue in the face. That doesn't mean that it's going to necessarily improve anything. It's sure as hell probably not going to do a damn thing about governments or religions, which are, depending on who you are and how you feel about it, could be considered the real problems. It's just not. But it's fun, so I'll have the fun. But no, oh man. Anyway, sorry, I'm going way out there. So anyway, did you protest it? Yeah, no, I didn't protest it. Not when I was initially, when I was signing up and everything, and eventually I ended up getting into psychological operations, the combat didn't stop there. Let's just put it that way. But yeah, I certainly had a crisis of conscience at eventually, that happens. You can only do this so long. But no, when I went into the I went into the military with absolute desire for vengeance. Like I said, I can never, ever forgive myself for that. I just can't. So, that's always going to be something that haunts me. Yeah. So, no, it's not too personal. I don't mind answering questions about the military. It's helpful when there are more specific ones like that than just giving this broad overview. Hey, what was it like in the military? It's well, how many months do you have, to listen to me? It's not that I was even in that long, but yeah. Anyway. Okay, let's get on to another question. I hope that answered that. Like I said, it's not something I'm proud of. It's not something I'm happy about. I'm willing to talk about it, but it's there. Yeah. So okay, let's move on to another question. This is the one originally I was going to. This is a lot more fun, a lot more exciting here. How do you generally divide and manage the time to read the books that you desire to read? Do you read multiple books at once? Okay, the answer is sort of yes. I'll explain how I manage the time to read. But as far as do I read multiple books at once? And the reason I say sorta is because generally I like to consume my fiction in the audiobook format now. And mainly that's because, I don't necessarily have to retain everything that's going on in the fiction, right? Not to say that I don't have a very good memory and I remember well, what I read or listen to. But the beauty of audiobooks, as I've said many times, is that, audiobooks, they've been around for a while, but I think the reason audiobooks are so viable, at least for me now, is because on my, on the Audible app or, the smart audiobook player app, you can set the speed for, 2x, 2.3x and all that. And I can listen to a book faster than I can read it. So that's the reason I've gotten into audiobooks, in the past couple of years, I guess, is because it allows me to consume books in a day. Now, if it's nonfiction, I have a couple problems. One is that I do want every little detail, and listening to it in an audiobook doesn't necessarily work because I feel like I'm a lot more of a visual person, I guess, in that way, maybe. Fiction is, I don't really like nonfiction in an audiobook format. I do like fiction a lot, especially because you can do a lot more in fiction in an audiobook format. So I'll usually be listening to a fiction book on Audible or something, and then I'll be reading a nonfiction book, either hard copy or on my Kindle Paperwhite. Okay. So do I read multiple books? Yeah, sort of, because I'm listening to one and I'm reading another. Okay. But I differentiate my fiction and my nonfiction in that way. But the other problem I have with a lot of the nonfiction that I want to read is that a lot of it doesn't exist. I like reading the rare books, the very rare books, or the old books. And a lot of them don't exist in ebook format. I mean, they just don't. Like the Mana Machine doesn't exist in ebook format. I could go down the list. I mean, you can see it in, whenever I'm doing video from the BDSM studio, there's books all over the place, but those books are all over the place because they don't exist in ebook format. I'd just as well not have these things, anchoring me down. I'd love it if they're in ebook format, and one day maybe I can afford to get them converted. I certainly can't do that now, but so that's how that breaks down. Is that, and as far as managing time, if I had my way, I would probably only read one book at a time. More so because I still feel like I'm kind of splitting attentions, and I don't really like that. Multitasking is, I used to be proud of it. It's a terrible fucking thing. As far as managing time, I have to schedule it. I have to say that, so there's two ways that this can go. I'll schedule an hour a night where I sit down and read. Or particularly if it's something I have on my Paperwhite, like I need significantly less sleep than the lovely and hyper-intelligent Dr. Stephanie Murphy was. Obviously, we sleep together. I will stay up later. She'll go to bed at midnight. I'll go to bed at 2. And from midnight to 2, I'll be reading on my Kindle Paperwhite because it's backlit, right? So, yeah, that's kind of how I manage the time to read all of these things. Is just, I guess the way I manage it is lack of sleep. It's lack of sleep, and I listen to things, when it's an audiobook, I listen to it at 2.3x. That's how I get through, like, all the Star Wars books I read and Star Trek and, all, a lot of the science fiction and everything. I do that in audiobooks, and I listen to them inside of 5 hours, even though, they could be huge books. But because I can listen to them at a faster speed and, I can process all that, I listen to them in, significantly under a day. So that's how I manage it, is that, I get to speed up the audiobook players. I don't sleep. And I make it a point to, in my schedule in time for reading, because for me it's so important. Like with Sovereign Tech, I need to know. I need to know what's up. I need to have perspectives. I need to know the latest information. All these different things. Or even with my clients, I have to read. I mean, there's plenty of night where I'm sitting out on the porch, okay, on the wood swing, and I'll have my Kindle Paperwhite, and I'll be reading InfoSec papers. I mean, that's because I need to. That's how, in many ways, how I'm making my living right now. Okay, so that's how I manage that time. I hope that answers that question. So, all right, we've got one more, and this one's kind of fun. Is there such a thing as a perfect album? And this was actually asked in the Sovereign Tech Facebook Uncensored group. So is there such a thing as a perfect album? Now, perfect album, this is an idea that was kind of brought on by Chris Jericho, who I'm a big fan of, on his own podcast, Talk is Jericho, and which is a wild, like, I know Chris Jericho's a wrestler. Of course, he also, sings metal for, with Fozzy, and he does a hell of a job, the band Fozzy. But he brings on, like, talk about conspiracy theories and all this other stuff. Like, he brings on a wide range of guests. And the interesting thing with Jericho, why I don't mind that he does guests, is that he always injects a lot of his own thoughts and really, he knows his shit. He's been around, and he's just, I just see him as totally legitimate. As for some other people that run interview shows, I don't think they really deserve to even be talking to the people that they're talking to. But regardless, so he had this idea of a perfect album, and one of the points of the perfect album was that every song is a hit. Like every song is good on it. Like that's kind of point one. I would add on some other things. I would think that it needs to be like, kind of maybe for a perfect album, it should cover the entirety of human emotions, or what you're used to, shall we say, a feeling, like if it's a bunch of glory songs, I don't know necessarily that'd make it, or victory songs or something. I don't know that would exactly make a perfect album. But I can think of a few perfect albums. That's for sure. Actually it's easier to think of perfect songs. Like really perfect songs. Like you think of something from Devin Townsend Band, right? Like Office Orchestra. I think it was his 06 album where Triumph. Look that song up if you've never heard it before. I mean, talk about a song, not just an album, but a song that encapsulates almost every genre of music, right down to the banjo. And then also encapsulates like almost every, possible human emotion. I mean, really, like Devin Townsend pulled it off. I'm a huge fan. Not to say that Orchestra itself would be what I consider a perfect album, but as far as perfect albums, yeah, like I said, I could think of a bunch of songs that would fit that. Oh boy. I mean, what inspired this question apparently was me talking about Def Leppard's 30th anniversary of their album Hysteria on episode 239 of Sovereign Tech. I'd probably give one to Hysteria. I think that's a perfect album. I mean, there's a reason it sold so many. It's really, really something. Kind of in the same vein, granted, I'm kind of a metalhead, so it's easy for me to call those shots, and say which ones of those would be perfect albums. Especially, again, almost every song's a hit, or at least every song is great, and then then there's like a varying amount of emotions within the song or within the album. I would easily give it to talk about another massive album that I think sold just about as much. I want to say it sold like 29 million copies. You'd have to verify me on that. But I'd give it to Motley Crue's Dr. Feelgood. I mean, yeah, the thing is look, the reason it's a perfect album, but you're probably cringed when I said it, isn't because the album's bad, because the songs aren't bad. It's just you've heard them so much. Every single fucking song. I mean, go down the list of that album. I mean, yeah, it's the opener TNT, that's whatever. It's not exactly a song. But yeah, TNT, then it goes into Dr. Feelgood. Then what do you get? You get Kickstart My Heart. I mean, even the songs that never made, well, I mean, and of course there's Without You. You got the ballad on there. And talk about, is it Sticky Sweet? I think it's Sticky Sweet, where it opens up with that. It's the sound of just waking up. It's such a wild little song. And one of my favorite Motley Crue songs off of that album would easily be She Goes Down. I mean, you never heard that on the radio, but the song's awesome. So there's a bunch on there, even like bonus tracks, like I Get It for Free, that they sang with the Nasty Habits on that. That was phenomenal. So I'd probably give it to Dr. Feelgood as well. I talked about this. I did a Patreon episode where I ranked and covered every Kiss album to ever come out. And you have to understand, that's a lot of fucking albums. I mean, that's a lot of albums. It's a lot of years. I would have given Revenge the perfect album, the Kiss Revenge from, what would that have been, 92 or 91? I would have given him that, but that song Paralyzed is so bad. I mean, it's probably the worst Kiss song ever done. And so I can't, if you stripped Paralyzed, and even the Eric Carr, the 81 Eric Carr Jam or something on there, like that doesn't take anything away from the album. It's there for a nice memorial piece to have Eric actually on the album, even though he had died, unfortunately of cancer before it came to fruition. But yeah, that song Paralyzed, no good. No good. Queensryche's Empire, I think that's got it. Even though I'm not a big fan of the song Della Brown, but I know a lot of Queensryche fans are. So if I was to look at it objectively, that's another album where it's track for track and you cover every emotion. I mean, there's albums that are track for track, but they don't cover like the spectrum of the human condition, right? I might give it to, even though this one might be a little bit of a stretch, I might give it to AC/DC's Back in Black. And the only reason I say that is because you have at the end, I mean, every song is great on that. What is it? Is that the number 2 best-selling album of all time behind like Thriller or something? Not counting Eagles' Greatest Hits because it's the Greatest Hits album. Back in Black's really up there. But I'd give it to Back in Black. And I guess you could say the last track, Rock and Roll Ain't Noise Pollution, sort of has kind of a down feel to it. You know, not exactly sad, but it kind of is a down feel. I mean, I love the way that opens up with, you know, lighting up the cigarette and just, you know, Brian Johnson just, I mean, that's so cool. Even though I'm not a smoker, I have to admit, like that is so badass. So maybe I'd give it to Back in Black. Any other albums? Those are the ones that come to mind really quick. And obviously all of those are either considered the top albums by the bands that made them, or, you know, you just the beauty's in the numbers. I mean, Thriller, which I just mentioned, is obviously a perfect fucking album. Bad is a perfect fucking album. I think Dangerous by Michael Jackson is a perfect album. Most people don't make it far enough into Dangerous, but I mean, you've got some amazing songs in that from MJ. You've got Give In To Me, the song Dangerous itself, you know, the title track, even though it's the end of the album, is phenomenal. Who Is It with Slash? Oh, fuck. It's great. But inarguably, Thriller and Bad are 2 absolutely perfect albums. Prince's Purple Rain, perfect album. Every single song. Almost every song on that was a hit. I think the only one that didn't go out as a hit was Computer Blue. I mean, woo. I mean, that's hot stuff. Yeah, I'm trying to think about trying to kind of broaden the range, not just to metal of perfect albums. I mean, I don't know if you can count greatest hits or like live albums. I'll tell you, if you gave it to live albums, well, there's 2 albums that come to mind if you give it to live albums, and then we'll wrap this up. Rick Springfield's Rick Springfield Alive. I know you're laughing. Forget about Jesse's Girl. Don't fucking just forget about Jesse's Girl. That's a masterpiece. That converted me. That made me a fan when I listened to it, and I heard it like just purely by accident when I was visiting Universal Studios when I lived in Florida for a bit. And like they were kind of, because it was on, you know, the Universal label, and they were sort of showing it off. Maybe he was performing there. I wish I had caught him then. I ended up seeing Rick Springfield a lot later on. The guy's just phenomenal. In fact, his album Shock, Denial, Anger, and Acceptance, which I think is an 2004 album, you know, guys in the 50s, I'd almost give that a perfect album. I can't think of a song that I hate on there, and every one of them is just a jam. But his live album, Alive, masterpiece right from the beginning. Opens up with Affair of the Heart, phenomenal. And then the other live album that I'd hand it off to, and this one might surprise you too, would be Garth Brooks' Double Live. Look, I am not a country fan, but that guy, okay, that guy at the time, I mean, in the 90s, you couldn't stop Garth Brooks. Nobody could stop that guy. In fact, you know, I love his album, Chris Gaines. You ever listen to that? If you've never listened to that, it wasn't a country album. That was it was weird, but it was pretty good. But man, yeah, that double live album, you know, opening right up, when it opened up with Baton Rouge, and then I forget exactly how it ended, but I mean, you know, it's a greatest hits, you know, live CD. I mean, that's what most live CDs are. But man, and you know, you can watch the concert of that. I think he did it from somewhere in New York. I mean, it was incredible, you know. I mean, that was like watching Garth Brooks, and you got to understand this. Watching Garth Brooks in the 90s, it was like watching Queen, you know, in like the early 80s or something. I mean, you couldn't touch Freddie Mercury, man. You couldn't touch him. You couldn't. No live. And look, and Queen is, I love Queen. Not farthest from my favorite. I mean, they are farthest from my favorite band, but I love Queen. Their whole discography is phenomenal. I don't think they have anything that would rank as a perfect album. In fact, their later stuff like Innuendo and stuff, maybe, but man, when Queen was in their day, they were unstoppable. Kiss couldn't match that kind of energy, and Kiss is my favorite band. I mean, Freddie Mercury, holy fuck. What are you going to do about that? You just couldn't top it. I mean, I think there's a reason that just about everybody that they offer, who'd they offer to? They offered it to George Michael. They might have offered it to even like Elton John or Joe Elliott from Def Leppard or something. Eventually, who did they get to do? Was it Paul Rodgers? Whoever they got to perform that Queen Plus album with them a few years ago. But I think there's a reason everybody stayed away, because you couldn't match that energy. Like just stop, because you're never you cannot repeat that. And probably to this day you couldn't. But I'll tell you, Garth Brooks got awfully fucking close as far as delivering that single man energy. I mean, look, I'm not taking anything away from Brian May or any of the other guys in Queen, but I mean, Freddie Mercury was, that the guy was, I don't know how he did it. I mean, he just put everything. And you bled and sweat with him on maybe you might not want to bleed with him, but you bled and sweat with him, on stage. I mean, he with everything he was doing. I mean, it phenomenal, absolutely untouchable. The guy, one of the greatest showmen of all time, just amazing. Even Michael Jackson, I don't think could touch what he was doing. Another one that would get close, but man, Queen was it. That was the act to beat. Whether you liked their albums all the way through or what, that was the act to beat. But anyway, yeah, so perfect albums. I think I listed off a few. Yeah, they're out there, especially the long track ones. All right. One last wild card. Perfect album. That I don't think is that crazy, and I don't think a whole lot of people would disagree with me on. Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill. I think they released every song off of the album. What was it, 16, 18 tracks? I mean, I don't know. Now it's a 4-disc collector's edition that I have. But Jagged Little Pill, amazing. You make an album like that, it's like Peter Frampton. You never have to do it again. You just never have to do it again. So even though she did, she kept on going and, never touched that kind of magic again. Oh, no. All right. So then another one comes to mind. And I've talked about this on past Patreon episodes. Evanescence's The Fallen, their quote unquote first album. I know there was an album before that, but their first album, their debut album on a major label. Yep. I mean, I told that story a million times. My buddy and I, Spock, we just left it in the CD player for weeks. We never took it out because you could just, and I think there's a pretty good run of Emotions on that too. So I think it could fit. That's another one where maybe it's a little iffy, kind of like Back in Black from AC/DC, but yeah, I really do. I think there's perfect albums out there. Alice Cooper, Trash. I'd almost give that a perfect album, perfect album. But obviously you can see where my, where my musical priorities lie. But anyway, so yeah, a perfect album, they do exist. I mean, and I can't imagine any other metric that everything I just listed off wouldn't match. I mean, sales numbers are huge. The musicianship, the production, there's no problems with production. I'm sure people would want to list off some Metallica albums in that, and I am all for it. I'd give it to Injustice for All, but where's the bass? Where's the fucking bass in that album? I don't know where it is. It's goddamn weird. In fact, I'm waiting. Because they did what did they? I have both of them. They did the re-releases of Kill 'Em All and Ride the Lightning. They're like 6 or 7 disc re-releases. Okay, and they're beautiful. Come with a ton of live shows and everything, and I mean just awesome. And they're remastered and they sound great. Not that they sounded bad before, but so the next two in line, because they're supposed to be doing this with all their albums. The next two in line would be Master of Puppets and Injustice for All. And people have asked the question. They've asked Lars. I don't know if you can ever talk to James, about anything, but they've asked Lars and they said, "Hey, are you going to put in some bass tracks on Injustice for All?" I think they should. I want to hear that album with bass, because when you hear it live, if you listen to or watch, I should say, Cunning Stunts, as the DVD's called, or even Live Shit, Binge, and Purge. You know, if you listen to that stuff, you get bass in those songs, and they sound awesome. So there's really no reason to do that. And it's not like, I mean, look, you know, only the diehards are going to buy these 6-7 disc box sets for each album. You know, it's not like it's one big, you know, discography that they're buying. They're buying one album that has 7 some odd fucking discs for it. So I would do that. I'd do the remastering. I'd put in the bass on it. And if people want to hear the original, or fuck, it's 7 discs. Put both versions. Put a remastered version with bass. Put a remastered version without bass. And then everybody's fucking happy, you know, because it's just a bonus disc, right? That's what I would do. And if they did that, I mean, I'd probably give Injustice for All. I'd give it that perfect album. The Black Album alone is tough not to hand it to. But I'm a weirdo with Metallica, because I loved Saint Anger. I loved Load and Reload. I loved everything they've put out. Just a top notch band. So anyway, there you go. There's some perfect albums for you. We covered a lot of ground in this episode. Got to quite a few questions. Feel free to send more in through the Patreon Messenger. You can email them to me at bbs@sovereigntech.com. You can ask them to me on Twitter. Sometimes I do little threads in the Sovereign Tech Uncensored group on Facebook where you can ask them there as well. One of the questions actually was from the Facebook group that we covered this week. So feel free to send those on. Anyway, that's it for this week. Thank you so much to everybody that has been a patron, that has just joined, or that has been a longtime patron. You have no idea how important you are to you know, if you're loving Sovereign Tech, what you're loving about it is so directly because of you. So thank you so much for all of that. Anyway, we got a new Sex and Science Hour will be out this week. New Sovereign Tech, got a dynamite one laid out for you. It's going to be great. I'll see you on the other side.